Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Rob and Misty Bliss today. Rob Bliss is a bagpiping dairyman turned beekeeper. And I was really hoping you were going to bring some bagpipes, Rob. After being raised on a dairy farm in Arizona for 12 years, his family moved their dairy operation to Payson, Utah, where he attended middle school, junior high, and high school. Rob attended Southern Utah University on a bagpipe scholarship. He took a break from his schooling to serve in the Brazil Rio de Janeiro mission for his church, followed by a stint in the Air Force, and then returned to his studies at BYU, majoring in mechanical engineering. Rob and Misty began their life together at BYU, but soon after moved to Texas to work on the family dairy farm with Rob's dad and brothers. Misty talked Rob into starting a beehive, and 6 years later, when they moved back to Utah, Rob had been bitten by the bee bug. By then, he had gone from 2 hives to a couple hundred hives, and he decided to go commercial. Bliss Honey now runs 2,000 to 3,000 hives and has been running a thriving business producing and selling raw honey and pollinating for farmers for nearly 20 years. Rob and Misty live in Oak City, Utah, and have 6 children, 4 children-in-law, and 5 grandchildren with 1 on the way. So please welcome Rob Bliss.
Thank you. Is that working okay? Can everyone hear me okay? I'm good at yelling if it's not loud enough. I have kind of a loud voice anyway, and okay. All righty. Well, so I hate that I'm up against fall break. So that's not really a fair, fall break. Listen to some guy talk about bees. who's gonna take bees? So as he said, my life I grew up in agriculture. My dad was an entrepreneur his whole life, with the dairy, and so for me, I kind of just, just by default, I kind of did that. Um, and so I got married in 1995, and as your professor mentioned, we moved to Texas, and not long after we got there, we kind of got really big into preparedness. We had cows, we got some goats and milked goats, and had a garden, and we kind of provided for ourselves in a lot of ways. But my wife says we need a good natural source of sweetener. What would you think about, getting a beehive or two? Well, I don't know. Bees kind of scared me. I didn't like the idea of getting stung, but I said, sure, let's try it. And so we got a hive that year, had someone we knew that had some bees, and they helped us get started. And of course, the hive died the first year. We didn't know what we were doing, and it was super intimidating. The way you start a beef hive is you have a package of, 10,000 bees inside of this package with a queen, and you have to shake it into a box and feed them and hope they start, And when you don't know what you're doing, it's pretty intimidating. So they died the first year, and the next year we tried a couple hives, and they did a little better that year. Back then, there was no YouTube. You couldn't do a lot of research online, really. We had the internet, but it was really limited back then, what you could see, what you could learn. So I'd read a lot of books. And anyway, we moved to Utah in 2002, and we left those 2 hives behind. And I thought we probably ought to get a few more once we got here. And so we did. We bought 15 hives, packages, and started them that way. And by that point, I had gotten bitten by the bee bug, and I loved it. And I love the taste of the taste of honey so much better. There wasn't much money yet. All the money went out at that point. But I like the taste of honey so much better than I like the smell of cow manure that I decided, this is the way to go. Let's just do bees full time. And so after a few years, and that's what I did. We had 15 hives, and the next year I bought a whole semi of bees, like 400 hives. And I split those hives in half and turned them into almost 800. And so kind of from one year running 15 to the next year, we were going to 800. And we just kind of took off from there. And so for a couple of years, I was in the dairy business and I was doing beekeeping. And so that's a shop we had at the dairy. And so as you can see, I just started buying boxes and all kinds of boxes to make beehives. And those 2 trailers there are forklift trailers. And that's my first bee truck right there, used bee truck. And we'd haul bees around with that. And our bees are on, you put on pallets, 4 hives to the pallet, and you can, too much handwork if when you're dealing with thousands of hives. You don't want to lift it all up by hand. So you move them, and you move bees a lot. And when you do move them, you want to move them with a forklift and a truck. You don't want to use, don't want to do it all by hand. So I did, for a couple years, I was kind of in the dairy and kind of in bees. And then around 2007, I left and just totally split off from the dairies. Right when everything crashed, the whole world crashed. Probably before you guys' at the time, you were all young at the time, but there was a big recession right then, the Great Recession, I guess, 2007, 2008. And I left the dairy right before that happened. And so basically kept bees for a few years then, and things really got bad in the dairy business after everything crashed. And so the way it worked for me is I had a lot of money in the dairy because I was a part owner, and so I started pulling money out to build my bee business. And it was, I did it all out of the money that I pulled out of the dairy, so I didn't have to borrow any money, and we were pretty successful. It worked well because I kept getting paid by the dairy, so I could live on the money that I was getting from the dairy for my family. And then all the money that the bees generated, I could just put right back into the business. And so I didn't have to pull any money out for a few years there to live on. And so it could just grow really easy and fast. And there was a big learning curve, and I could make mistakes and kill a bunch of bees, but it was okay because I was still getting money from the dairy to live on. And so it didn't hurt me that bad. And then at a point, the dairy started doing really bad. And my dad and my brothers, who were still in the dairy business, the things were really bad and weren't sure they were going to make it. They built another new dairy and kind of at the wrong time. And so I felt bad that everything I'd pulled out, I was doing great and they were all suffering. So I decided, without the dairy, I never would have been able to, do a big scale commercial beekeeping operation anyway. So I decided I was going to sell all my bees, sell everything, and put the money back in the dairy so they could buy some cows because they needed more cows for the new dairy they built. So I don't know, it was 2010 or maybe 2011 or something, 12. Anyway, I sold everything and just started buying cows with it and putting them in the dairy. And as I'll talk about later, that didn't really work that well. Sometimes it's hard in a family business, working with members of your family, and some of the same problems that existed before. Surprise, surprise, were still there when I went back. And so it was better for me just to not be in it. So I decided I wanted to do a different business. I got into a box making business where we produced boxes, bee boxes that, you build hives that you turn into a beehive. And so we got some really high production, expensive equipment, and I started doing that because that was a little easier on me physically, and I didn't have to be out of town all the time to California and the Dakotas and everywhere you go with bees when you're chasing honey flows and pollinating for people. And I thought, this is just a perfect scenario. All this can work right at home and make a ton of money. There's big demand for boxes, and I penciled it all out, and I was going to get rich, the way I penciled it out, because you can make so much money off of it. And it didn't turn out that way. We had problems with the machinery that I'd bought, and it took years to get it going right. And by then I'd gotten in a whole bunch of debt, something that I'd never had before. It was a struggle. For years, it was a struggle. I hired someone that I thought would really be good, and then he was pretty good, but couldn't overcome some of our problems that we run into. And there's a learning curve there too, as well. You can't just jump into something you don't know and instantly have it working like I thought. Anyway, so fortunately, after 5 or 6 or 7 years in that business, I had a big company that wanted that machinery. And so I got lucky and they just bought everything. And so then I decided, I'm going to go full speed back into bees. And so we got back into bees and been doing bees ever since. So, and I heard some pictures I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures now about kind of what we do over the years. And at the end, I'll take some questions at the end, but if you have a burning question that has to be answered right now, you can stop me and I'll answer it. So that was the first year we went to California to pollinate almonds. So as a commercial beekeeper, at least on the western side of the United States, the number one, your number one Well, you make more money from pollinating. Your number one source of income is from pollination, not from honey production. And so this is pollinating almonds right here. And we haul thousands of hives of the almonds, and we have to spread them out. So we might have maybe between 12 and 24 hives in each. They call them a drop. It's in each location, and we'll just spread them out for miles and miles. I'm extracting honey right there. With some of my daughters are extracting honey. Same thing. That's my beautiful wife right there. That's tanks are full of honey, old milk tanks that we repurposed to store honey in. They're stainless inside. This is the first, these next couple pictures are when I left the dairies, I had to build my own warehouse and shop and stuff. So that's what these are. The one there on the left is a woodworking shop. We make a lot of our own woodenware. The one on the right is where we extract, that's the honey house and warehouse. So we store everything and we extract the honey in there now. So when I got back into beekeeping, so can anyone guess what this is? Yeah, a whole bunch of bee boxes. It's a little more than that. If you can tell they're full of bees. So what happened is I got out of. Did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna guess did a semi tip over?
Exactly. That's what happened. So I got out of the bee business and got into woodworking, and it didn't go well, and I was struggling, and we were losing money, and it was stressful. And I told my mom, I said, I just need to run bees again. She's like, oh, you will someday. I said, I don't want to someday. I want to right now. I can't deal with this woodworking. It's going horrible. Need to get back into bees because we made pretty good money with bees. And so the very next day after I had that conversation with her, an insurance company called me up and said, hey, we had a big beekeeper from California. He was shipping his bees from California to North Dakota. And out in Nevada, his driver, something happened. He went off the road and he crashed his semi-truck. Would you be interested in salvaging those bees for us? And anyway, this is a long story right there. I won't get into details on that, but you know, it's probably worth $80,000. And after everything was said and done, I was able to buy it from him for $3,000. That's a story in and of itself. But the insurance company, it was kind of fun, you know, getting back at the insurance company sometimes because they kind of wanted to take advantage of me, and the way everything worked out, it was kind of fun that I was able to get those bees for pennies on the dollar from them. So anyway, we got these. We worked almost. It was the longest I've ever stayed up in my life. We stayed up for like 52 hours straight, or I did 52 hours. That's 2 nights without sleep and some days on before and after too. And we salvaged because it kind of went down. There's a road up there, and it kind of went down into a wash there. And so we had every box. We couldn't bring our forklift down, so every single box we had to try to get. So there's 2 boxes per hive in this scenario here, and we had to try to get the right pieces back together. Because if you get the wrong box, one hive with another hive, you'll end up losing a queen. You want each queen for each hive. And if you combine the hive, you might get 2 queens in a hive and one will kill the other, or you might end up with no queens in a hive, and then they're going to be doomed. And so we had to try to, some of them you can see they're kind of together still, other ones aren't. And anyway, it's a total disaster mess. And do you think the bees are happy in a situation like that? You know, I probably never got so many bee stings in my life. I had my brother-in-law come and help me, and he's a hobbyist beekeeper, and he got so many bee stings that he started throwing up. And it was kind of you move bees at night. And so we were there all night working and loading them on our truck and hauling them home and then coming back and doing it again. We brought 2 trucks the next time. And we finally got it all, and they were incredible bees. And so we split all those hives. We made 2 hives out of 1. And so really went from having no hives to just a week or 2 later after splitting them all, we had 800 hives. And then we went back to pollination the following year and got a decent check, and we were just rolling again after that. And then it wasn't long after this is when we sold the wood business. And so we really got going again. But those are 2 nights never to be forgotten right there. You can see they're full of bees, those ones. But it was a disaster. So we're assembling. This is my young son right here, Joseph. He just graduated from Snow College last year. He's a little bit bigger than that now. We're just assembling. Now here we are in a bee yard. What we're doing right here is we're making package bees. So one way you can start a hive is with packages. The thousands of bees in a package, and you shake them into your box with your with your honeycomb and stuff. And so we're out there making packages. It's a detailed process that I won't go into. And that's what those are all full of bees. They're individual packages. There's probably a couple hundred right there. This is when we went and bought some packages in California. I didn't make these ones. Misty went with me, and we went with some friends and picked up all these packages. Here's a semi that went to South Dakota. We made a huge honey crop in South Dakota this year. I think it was 2015. Those are all bees on the box. Those dark is all bees. The hives are so big and so strong. They grew so huge out there that the bees, they can't really fit inside, especially if it's warm. And it was a little bit warm right then, so they call it bearding. They beard up on the outside of the box. And the semi was not fully loaded yet. And that's how we haul them from state to state, is on big semis. We spread them around with our smaller bee trucks. See, this is how we'll stack up a bee truck sometime to move them. Here we have bees in the oranges. You see some orange bloom. One thing I didn't know is that orange trees, it takes over 1 year for the oranges to be finished. So when it's time to start picking, you have bloom for the next oranges coming along. So you'll have oranges and bloom at the same time. And orange blossom honey is just kind of a neat honey. You taste the citrus in it really strong. So we're there making orange blossom honey. That's what these are. Okay, now when I talked about my box machines that we bought to mass produce these boxes, we could make over 1,000 a day. So it's just 4,000 panels, and they all hooked together. We had a really good design, really a well-built box. And at the time I thought, oh, this is going to be great, because this automated machinery makes the best box out there. I thought we'd be able to sell it for a premium because they're so good. Well, I learned that people do not care about a premium box. The only thing they care about was the cheapest one they could possibly get. And so I kind of shot myself in the foot. I thought, we'll have the best box out there. We can sell it for maybe 50 cents a box more, $1 more. Nah, it didn't matter at all. And it took us a little bit longer to build them because of the certain cut we did that made them really good. But people do not care, unfortunately. They didn't care. They want, well, what's the price? I don't care about how good it is. How cheap is it? Well, $10, I can get it for $9.95 over there. So I'll go with the one that's 5 cents cheaper. It drove me crazy. But anyway, this is machinery. We struggled with it for years that it didn't quite work. We finally got it going pretty good. But by the time we did, too little too late. And so we sold it all and got out. All right. Bees in the oranges in California. Working bees. These are honey supers that we're going to put on the bees. We're getting these prepped, ready to put on semis. We just kind of leave them all stacked up, and we'll put that whole stack on a semi with the forklift. There's a swarm right there. See that big old cluster of bees up there? That's a swarm. Hives like to swarm in the springtime. That's how they divide. And those bees are really bearding. Those are huge, huge hives right there. We're getting ready to go to California there with all this equipment to make new hives. And that's a load of boxes that we'd made. They're not put together. They're all individual panels. We shipped those to Arizona right there when we were in that business. Now is when I finally sold all this stuff. That's these pictures. They came and they just bought it all from me. Those two machines. The one before was a big old huge Ging ripsaw, 50-horse motor on there. It was kind of neat machinery. It was kind of a sad day, so I had to take a picture of it. But 10% of me wants to cry when I see that. 90% of me wants to just to pray and thank God that that's out of my life, because it was so stressful. These are hives that are making pretty good honey. That's why they're stacked up so tall. They make honey and you just keep putting boxes on. They're doing pretty good there. That's our new extractor we bought a few years ago. That's the first of the honey that we extracted going into the stainless tank. Just some ways that we bottled it and sold it. We package honey this way too and sell it in 30-pound cases. That's nice bright yellow beeswax. We'll render that off of the wax cappings when we cut it. We cut them off to extract the honey, and then we melt those down and make these 40-pound blocks of honey. We keep bees in Colorado now, and we have to build these electrified bear fences to keep the bears out of our bees, because bears they smell it and they'll just it's just horrible. So I brought my son on the right there. He's the one that graduated last year, and my nephew. They helped me to build this bear fence. We built like 20 of them now over in Colorado. And there's some bees inside of a bear fence. We're working those. More bees in bear fences. This is down in the gravel pit where we move our bees to Colorado. We'll set them there off the semis, and then we'll pick them up and we'll spread them all out into the different locations to make honey. Another bear fence, another bear fence. Here's a way to keep them. It's not a bear fence, but we can keep them away from the bears by putting them up on shipping containers, because the bears can't climb up there. Although we did have a little bear get up there once. There was a tree behind we didn't realize, and it went up the tree and it went up on top. So sometimes they outsmart us. Stinking bears. There's a bunch of honey, and they made so much honey that they filled up even that. That's right underneath the lid that you pull off, and they filled that up. Okay, and here's a bear attack right here. We had bears get into some hives. They just trash it. They just destroy everything. It's just sickening. I've shed tears over this. We had this protected with that net, and the bear couldn't get under it because we had the way we had it strapped down. So they just ripped the net apart. Big old heavy duty net. They just ripped the bear and they just tore right into it. There's bees out in California making a huge honey crop out there of black sage honey. There's all these different kind of honeys we can make, depending on what state we're in and what forage the bees are on, what blossoms are on. And it's all different. Some are darker, lighter, more fragrant, have a strong taste, a mild taste. All honeys are so different. That's in California again, making that black sage. That's all black sage honey. We're ready to load on a semi. This is in eucalyptus, actually. Those are eucalyptus trees out in California. Hauling bees. So in the wintertime, we put all our bees here in Moroni, not far from here in Moroni, in an old turkey shed. And we keep it pitch black most of the time. We have some red lights on there, but they can keep the temperature perfect at 40 degrees. So it's not getting, negative 20 outside and then, warming up, and that's a little bit hard on the bees. So we like to keep it at a solid temperature, a steady temperature. And they just do better. They eat less dye, and they eat less honey, because we have to have a lot of honey in the hive there to be able to eat through winter so they don't starve. And so in here, they eat at that temperature in the dark, they eat the least amount of honey of any other temperature, any other scenario. That's bees hitting we put in California ready to spread out to do almonds. But you can overwinter bees in Utah right in the snow. You can do that. It works. It's not ideal, but it works okay. There's hauling my forklift to California to put them into the almonds, and through a big snowstorm, and a little bit of snow there. Working at night. That's an aerial video of some of the almonds. There's in the almonds. You can see down that row. We'll put bees there that will just spread them out. Let them go for miles. We'll spread them out. They're in blossom there, and there's a really yummy smell. It's kind of fun. On my way home once, I blew my engine, and so I'd have a semi pick me up, save me. This here is we're doing some monitoring for mites. Mites are the #1 killer of bees. And we'll put a paper plate underneath the hive. We'll put some medication in that it kills mites, and then we'll pull it out and check. And there's quite a few mites on this one, so we have some mite issues there we got to deal with. There's some mites on the young bee larva. Okay. So there's all kinds of problems you run into. Mites, bears, wind. Here's a fire. A whole bunch of hives there. There's all burnt down. Burned to the ground. 4 hives in each one of those pallets. There was honey supers on them too, so it has just melted them down. Wind sometimes will mess us up. There's a picture of a queen right there. You can obviously see her. She's quite a bit longer. Sometimes you're not careful and you'll dump all your honey onto the ground. I'm out of town a lot, so I'll have to FaceTime my wife to catch up and see how everything's doing. That's young brood right there. Nice, beautiful patch of brood, solid patch of brood. Bees. Okay, I think we're all right. Sometimes, I don't do this a lot, but sometimes you go to a farmer's market, or this here is Oak City Days, just our local town. We'll sell honey to people, and here's a frame of honey that they're scraping the honeycomb out and trying it. And so we do Oak City Days now and then and sell honey. There's an observation hive, kind of fun. There's storage inside of our warehouse. Okay, and that's my last picture. So that's just kind of a quick overview of, kind of a year in the life of a beekeeper and kind of a little bit of history of what we've done. So does anybody have any questions up to this point? I kind of want to talk a little bit more about the business end of it now and some of the stuff that some mistakes I've made and some of the things that I've done right. Yes.
You mentioned that when that semi tipped over, the insurance company called you.
Yes.
How did they know to call you?
Well, there was another beekeeper. Somehow they'd gotten, they'd been calling beekeepers. It was the time of the year it's super busy. No beekeeper had time to mess with it. But I didn't have bees. And so one of the beekeepers said, I think Rob Bliss doesn't have bees right now. Call him. Maybe he can help you. And right before then, I'd got my truck and I wanted to get back into bees. So I said, I'm going to get my truck all fixed up. So I got new tires and it needed some work done. I got everything ready to go. Then the insurance. And so another beekeeper told them to call me. And so they called me and we haggled back and forth. And I said, just sell me the bees. And they're like, no, we can't sell you the bees. This is a salvage operation. You need to salvage them for us. And so I went out there, worked all night, brought a bunch of the bees home. And then I was so tired. I'm like, because I worked all day, worked all night. Then I was the next day I had to work. And I just couldn't wait to go to bed. And so he called me back the next day and said, well, how did it go? I says, well, we got about 150 of the bees moved. Well, you going to go finish the rest? I says, no, I'm too tired. I've worked all, well, but you're going to do it. You already have half some of our bees. Well, come get them then. They're right here. I'll show you where they're at. Well, but what about the rest of the bees? Well, sell them to me and then maybe we'll talk. Well, this is a salvage operation. We'll pay you to do it. We're going to pay you. I said, I don't care about that anymore. I want the bees. I don't care about working for you. I'm too tired. And it was really good that I was so tired that I didn't care. If they were probably going to pay me a lot. And I talked to people where the wreck happened. Some people that live there, and they're like, oh, this bees crash every few years. We'll have a semi crash. And normally the insurance company pays $10,000 to $20,000 for a company to come in and foam them down and kill them. And they come in with a big track hoe and they have to haul the bees up, everything away to the dump. And the insurance company, they pay for that. And so I was really fortunate that I knew that information. And I said, well, then why don't I just charge you and I'll clean up. Then I said, I'm not even going to charge you. I will move your bees for you for free. You let me keep them and I won't charge you $20,000 like you normally pay. I'll do it for free. So you're going to save $20,000. Well, let me talk to my boss. And we went back and forth. And well, okay, how about paying half what they're worth? Okay, how about pay? And finally I said, I said, no, I want them for free. No, I'm saving you $20,000. I'm saving you $20,000. Finally, they said, we cannot do it for free. You have to pay something. Can you pay $3,000? I said, I'll pay $3,000. So, they're worth probably, at that time, there was probably $60,000 or $70,000. And I got them for $3,000. So anyway, it was kind of fun. That was a fun experience there. So I want to tell you some do's and don'ts from things that I've learned that a lot of this could apply to any entrepreneurial, activity you'd ever want to be involved in. So I think the most important thing for me anyway, when I started doing bees, I always really enjoyed the dairy and I thought that's probably what I wanted to do forever. But man, I loved bees. I love bees. When I started doing bees, I didn't want to go on vacation. I didn't want to take the weekend off. I would usually take Sunday off, and that's about the only day I wanted to take off. I hated the night, because then I had to go home and go to bed. I didn't want to do anything except for work bees. If I could have stayed awake 24 hours a day, I would have done it because I loved it so much. It was like you're a little kid and it's Christmas time. That's what it was like. For years, it was like that. Every single day that I got to go work bees. Monday was my favorite day of the week because it meant I got to work bees all week long. And for years, it was just, the passion was so great that all I wanted to do was study. And then I got it. But by that point, in the 2000s, I could get on some online forums, and there's no YouTube yet, but I could read and ask questions. And It was really neat. And so that the passion that I had for that carried me a long way. If all I cared about was the money, that can maybe carry you a little ways, but if you're going to be an entrepreneur, now you can work for someone else and you don't have to necessarily love it. You can, you're getting your paycheck, you're putting in your time, click putting your time card in, whatever. You can do that, and that's fine. I've done that too. But man, when you love something, you can do anything when you love it enough. And so if you want to be an entrepreneur, it helps so much if you love what you're going to do. It just makes all the difference, because work doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can work around the clock. You almost don't need to sleep. So one thing that I didn't have the opportunity to do, and it would have helped me a lot, is when I left the dairy, I just kind of went, it was just the, trial and error. I read some books, I read on some forums online, I talked to some people, but I never worked for a commercial beekeeper. So there's so much that I didn't know, and I made so many mistakes. I killed hives by doing stupid things that I didn't know. I tried things that I thought, oh, this will be a great idea. And well, it wasn't a great idea. It was a bad idea. And if I would have worked for a commercial beekeeper, my life would have been so much easier. So if there's something you really want to do bad, man, I suggest finding someone that's really good at that and work for them. Even if you have to work for peanuts, be an apprentice for a while and learn what you're doing. Because there's a steep learning curve to so many things. Learn for a few years and then jump out on your own and do it. I was fortunate that I could lose money for a few years and it didn't matter, because I had money coming in from the dairy. And so I lost money for a few years. And then after that, we started making money. But once I got past that learning curve. I want to talk a little bit about debt. Debt can be such a mixed blessing. So debt can be incredible. Okay. Debt can be great. Debt can be bad. For example, in the dairy business, we had a small milk tank, and they had to come every day to pick up our milk. But they said, we'll pay you 30 extra cents a hundredweight, which is substantial, 30 cents for every 100 pounds of milk, if we can come every other day, if you have a bigger tank. And so I crunched some numbers, and it was like $50,000 to buy a tank. So I bought a tank. This is when I was staying in Texas, and financed it, whatever my payments were, $400 or $500 a month. And, $400 or $500 a month to make $5,000 or $6,000 a month. It's a no-brainer to borrow the money and pay a little bit of interest on that debt to make way more money. That worked so well. It really worked out perfect. And on the other hand, when I went into this woodworking business, I'm like, I have a lot of equity in my buildings. I'm going to borrow a bunch of money and buy this awesome machinery, buy a whole bunch of wood, semis of wood, stock up and just start cutting boxes, which we did. But then by the time the boxes were all cut and sold, no, I still had a whole bunch of money, to the bank. I thought it should have been paid off by the time we sold all our wood. But so we ended up in debt trouble there, and I'm still not 100% out of the debt from that woodworking business. And so, man, I'd be careful with debt. Just be super careful. Just be really smart. Another thing is taxes. Sometimes when you're growing a business, it's kind of nice not to have to pay taxes for a few years. And you can do that if you're smart about it. I wouldn't do it for too long, but in the dairy business, a lot of time, my dad loved to do this. If we had a whole bunch of taxes, he's like, okay, I'm going to borrow a whole bunch of money from the bank, which is not counted as income, and then I'm going to spend it right in the end of the year, before December 31st. I'm going to borrow $1 million and then spend it all. And so it looks like you have $1 million in expenses with no income. And so it gets you out of taxes. And while you're growing, that's a tool you can use to help. But you can only do that. But that gangs up. If you borrow $1 million this year, then maybe you have to borrow $1.5 million next year, and then $2 million the following year. And then eventually, when you're not borrowing money, it's going to look like you made tons of income. And then you're going to have a big old huge fat tax bill. So, it can be a great tool to help you temporarily if you're growing. But then once you stop growing, then it can catch up with you, and it can hurt you. One thing that sometimes I've done wrong is I thought I had this great idea with bees. Oh, I'm going to try it this way. No one does it this way. And I come up with this great idea. This is the way to go. And so And instead of thinking it's a great idea and doing it just on a few hives or, even 50 hives, I might do it for 400 hives or 800 hives and say, this is the way to go. This is going to help us with our mite problem or with make more honey or whatever. And I just spend all this money and time building equipment a little bit different way or trying something new. And then I learned, that was a stupid idea. And so I just kind of went all in on something that wasn't the best idea. So it's better if you're going to try something new, do it on a small scale first, make sure it works. If you're trying a chemical to kill the mites, that you're not sure it's good, well, don't do it to all your hives. Just do it to some of them first. Because we had one year, we put some, this is just a few years ago, there's a mite treatment. I follow this scientific beekeeper guy that he's always trying new things to get on top of our mites, because our mites are our biggest problem. Killing a bug on a bug is really hard without hurting the host bug. But there's these Swedish dish towels that we can soak up with oxalic acid, and you put in there, and it doesn't kill the mites, but it keeps them from reproducing. And so I thought, this is the way to go, and it does work. And I did it on all my hives. Well, then we went ahead and stored them for winter. Bees look great going into winter. We put them all in the shed, and then little did I know that you have to take that out before winter. You put them in the shed, and it makes the bees sick, and it kills them. And so we lost 1,000 hives in the shed. I mean, that almost destroyed us. That was just a few years ago, and that was just such a bad mistake. Leaving them inside. Now we do it now, and it's no problem. We just have to make sure and scrape them out before we put them in the shed, because when the bees are forced to stay in there with that oxalic acid, it just makes them sick. It doesn't bother them during the summer, but in the winter when they're forced to be in there with it, it killed them. So experiment small before you go all in. I guess the last thing, about out of time here, is be careful with partnerships, and especially if you're working with family members, okay? Working with family can be one of the greatest blessings ever. It can also be one of the worst things that you could ever experience. If some of you don't get along, or even your spouses don't get along, there's a lot of scenarios that don't go well, and there's jealousy and finger pointing, and different personalities and different your brother might want to go this direction with the business. You might want to go this way. There's just all kinds of problems that can arise. So be really, really careful if you work with a family member. If it's with a friend, so what if you don't get along and you turn into enemies? That's sad, but if it's a family member, it's just so much harder. So be really careful there. Okay, that's the end of what I've got. We have a few minutes, I think, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes for questions, if you guys have any questions about anything. Yeah. Do we have a resale what? Retail. Yeah, I do, but it's not. I have a partner. It's not our names aren't on anything together, but we kind of partner up, and he buys almost all my honey and he sells it. He does big time into TikTok. He does TikTok every day, and he does all these fancy health honey cream stuff, and he sells tons of it on TikTok. And then he'll also deliver it, like in those cases you saw, to people that resell it. And sometimes we'll just sell it in the 55-gallon drum. If we have too much honey that he can't sell it, we'll leave it in the 55-gallon drum, put it on semis, and ship it to bottlers that bottle it and put it in Walmart or Costco or whatever.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask if there's always been a high enough demand that you've never had to worry about producing more than you can sell.
No, it sells pretty easy. And the one thing that's awesome about honey is I can save it for years. Okay, we couldn't do that with milk. We can save it for one day. We can keep it on the property. So they could pick up every other day. You can't keep it 2 or 3 days. It has to be every other day. So 2 days at the most, so you can hold it. And then it has to be out of there. Honey, it doesn't matter. I don't have to refrigerate it, nothing. I can store it as long as I want. And it's not hard to sell. Honey's pretty easy to sell. If you're willing to take a little bit lower price, you can just sell all you want to the bottlers. There's different ones we sell to. But we don't sell much of it that way anymore. If we're desperate, we can. But it's not that hard to sell honey, fortunately. Yes.
So who are your biggest customers? Who do you sell to?
My biggest customers are, most of it goes to people that buy it for emergency preparedness. They just like buying cases of it to store in their home. And they'll use it and they'll store it. Also, a lot of farmers markets. My my friend partner, he's always picking it up and bottling in all kinds of different bottles and ways. And he takes it to Colorado, Utah, and a lot of farmers markets in the summer, all kinds of farmers markets. So, and then we do sell some in drums also. Anything left over, we'll just ship to the bottlers. So, yeah, Sam.
When you guys first started out, how did you like land contracts with those big online retailers? How did you get your name out there, I guess?
A lot of phone calls, and I was fortunate that there was another local beekeeper that pollinated for its South Valley Farms is who I pollinate the almonds for in California. And he pollinated for them, and then he put in a good word for me. And I'd only been a big scale. It was my first year, and I had, 600 or 800 hives, and that first year, and he put in a good word for me, and I called and said, "You guys, would you take me?" And they said, "Oh, sure." And after that, I've always been able to go back because my bees are good. They grade your bees. They break there's 2 boxes there. They'll crack them in the middle, and they'll look at it. And if there aren't many bees, they don't pay you. If there are a lot of bees, the more the bees you are, the more money they'll pay you. And so if you have good bees every year, they want to keep coming back. If a whole bunch of your bees there's no bees in there, or not very many bees, they're not going to get their trees pollinated. And so they'll say, "Sorry, we don't want you next year." So, anything else? Yes.
So, looking back, we were sitting in a class like this,
Mhm.
studying mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
Now, spend this decades now running businesses.
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself? Like, what do you wish you would have known back then?
Well, I wish I would have known, and you can't always do this, of course. I wish I would have known what I wanted to do. I mean, I like mechanical engineering. It was great and stuff. And I like dairying, but bees, I love that. I wish I could have found what I loved earlier in life. Of course, but that's not something you can really do anything about, and try a lot of different things, Don't just decide you're going to do one thing. I mean, unless that's your passion, then go for it. But, dip your foot into a lot of different things to see what you really love to do. Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to love it, or you're only going to be so successful. So.
Well, on that note, Rob,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.